Y'all, I hate when I'm talking about books and videos and I can't find the physical book and then later I find it. I told y'all about Real by Kennedy Ryan and had to put a picture on the screen, and then a couple days later I found the dang book. Jesus Christ. Speaking of Real by Kennedy Ryan, I used to hate romance, and I had this like coming to Jesus moment with myself about how I am constantly telling y'all to read outside of your comfort zone, but I was in fact not reading outside of my comfort zone. I was reading diversely, but I wasn't reading outside of my comfort zone, right? Like, I was refusing to read horror. I was refusing to read romance. I was refusing to read short story collections, right? But then as I started to help myself evolve a little bit, I realized that a characteristic of a really good author is an author that can get you to read outside of your comfort zone. And that's how I ended up reading Holler Child by Latoya Watkins and absolutely loving it. Hi friends, welcome back to Shelby in the Book Club. I'm Shelby Monet, and in today's video I'm going to do a book review for Holler Child by Latoya Watkins, which is a collection of short stories by her. Also, every time I look at this cover I notice something different. I didn't realize that it was people for a while because I was just so excited about the book and about supporting Latoya Watkins that I wasn't even paying attention. But the little baby in her pigtails, right? And homegirl with the fro. And it's a man down here, and he cute in his pink. I say pink instead of pink because this takes place in Texas. These people are Southern. So before I get into the book review, I want to talk about reading outside of your comfort zone, right? I spend a lot of time telling you guys to do this, and I advocate for reading diversely. I have since the beginning of my journey as a woo child, a girl done lived many lives, a booktuber, book talker, bookstagrammer, the owner, runner of said book club, a bookstore owner. My whole thing has been for you guys to read diversely and to put diverse books in front of you. But I think with my experience in these book communities, I think a lot of times people think that that means to only be reading authors of color, right? To only be reading things that by people that don't look like you, that are not where you're from. And honestly, reading outside of your comfort zone and reading diversely means that you read a little bit of everything, right? I wanted to talk about a few ways that I do that and that I incorporate that in my reading habits, and how I ended up with reading a collection of short stories when just a few years ago I would have told you that I absolutely positively hated short stories. Okay, how do I read diversely? First, I'm always buying books, and when I bookshop, sometimes I'm going into bookstores and I am looking for particular things, right? Maybe I know that the new Jasmine Ward book is coming out, so I'm going to the bookstore and I'm going to buy that. Then there's that. A lot of the times I'm just going to look, and I'm watching what people that don't look like me are buying, right? What are they leaning towards? Now, do I have some hard nose? Yes. I'm not buying no damn Colleen Hoover. Y'all can, never mind. I'm not buying no Colleen Hoover, right? But and also, I may find something new or something that looks interesting to me just based off of what they're doing, right? Or I listen to when people are talking. I'm nosy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But that is one way that I do it. I spend a lot of time in bookstores when I can. One, because that just feels good to me, and also, you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who you're going to come across. You never know when you're going to meet your next book friend. And I'm always talking to the people that work in bookstores too, because I want to pick their brains. Like, what are you guys reading? Why do you like this? Why don't you like that? So on and so forth. So for example, I picked up a new book the other day. I'm sorry, I don't mean to push past you. I'm sorry. But I picked up a new book the other day. This is called The Free People's Village by Sim Kern. I almost jacked it up. Now, this is not something that I would normally pick up, right? If I was still judging books by its cover, I would look at this and be like, okay, that looked like a robot. That looked like somebody dead uncle. I don't necessarily know, but they had a little thing, like a little sticky on the front of this, right? That said that the dust jacket turns into a poster for the band that is mentioned in this story. So that piqued my interest a little bit, right? And when I read the synopsis, I was like, ooh, this might actually be something that I might like, right? It is about Maddie Ryan, a 24-year-old English teacher at a predominantly black high school in Houston. Teaching is just a job for her to pay her. For her, it pays the bills, and she lives for brand practices with her queer punk band Bunny Bloodlust. Now, if I had not paid attention to the little blurbs that are around the bookstore, if I had kept to my, oh, this cover doesn't necessarily, like, it looks cool, but there a lot of times as a black person, I have a default of seeing certain things and assuming that they're not for me, right? And I think a lot of us do that just because we're human. It's kind of like a built-in security system, right? So if I had originally looked at this and went with my security system and said, this is not necessarily for me, I could be missing out on a really good story and maybe a new author that I've never read before, right? A new to me author that I could be missing out on something. So I say that to say, pick up the books that pique your interest that you wouldn't normally read. It is a way for you to read outside of your comfort zone, right? This may be my new favorite book. And how do I know if I don't try? So keep that in mind. Another thing that I do, is I read the back of the blurbs on books. The back of the blurbs. I read the blurbs on the back of the books of the authors that I do know that I love. The reason that I do that is because these authors are a little bit similar to this particular author, but it's usually all kinds of races, genders, ethnicities on the back of these blurbs, right? Which can help you read outside of your comfort zone, read diversely, right? Okay, what does it mean to read diversely? You know how when you hear nutritionists and stuff talk and they say to you, you should be eating the rainbow? That's how I feel about reading, y'all. You should be reading the rainbow. Every genre, every gender, every ethnicity, every skin tone, every like, you should be reading everything, right? Like, you just should. I think it'll make you a better reader. I think it'll make you enjoy reading a little bit more. I think an example I can give you is Greek mythology, right? We are all taught Greek mythology at some points in our life, right? Whether you had to read the Iliad and the Odyssey, whether you have watched all the movies a million times, whatever the case may be, Greek mythology is kind of like ingrained in us. It wasn't until I got to college until I realized, one, how many other mythologies there are, right? Because they don't really teach that in school. At least they didn't teach it to me. Because the school system is made out of paper mache and spit. it wasn't until I got to college that I learned about Indian mythology, right? And how creative they are and how much better their mythology is than Greek mythology. Like, you're missing out on whole different worlds and experiences just because you are staying inside your little box. And I know it's safe in your little box, right? Because my little box is historical fiction, right? But when I step outside of that box, there are so many good things. Now you're wondering, how do I step out of the box? I think you need to start small. Our upstairs neighbors are having a baby, so they're building furniture. They stopped all that banging, and now I can think straight. So I think you need to start small when you are starting to venture outside of your comfort zone with reading, right? And I think the great thing about reading is that there are so many sub-genres. There are so many subgenres. There are so many subgenres, right? So if you like historical fiction, but you want to read romance, you can find historical fiction romance, right? So for me, in the last video that I posted, I mentioned that I read Indigo by Beverly Jenkins, right? Historical fiction and romance, right? It bridges that gap to me. You can also find historical fiction that has fantasy elements in it. I did a review for Kindred by Octavia Butler. Oh, I love that book so much. But it bridged the gap between two genres for me. That one that I love, one that I want to incorporate a little bit more, right? So you can do that. You can find all types of things that blend together. I did a video looking for more historical fantasy books, right? Because I do want to read more in that genre because I really, really enjoy it. You can find things that incorporate the genre that you love and maybe a genre that you want to love to ease the transition for you. You don't have to dive head deep into horror, right? And get It by Stephen King, and now you scared and sleeping with a ring of candles and all the flashlights you own and every light in your house on, because you wanted to dive in head first. You don't have to do that, okay? And again, that goes for every genre. I wanted to get into romance. I found things that were easy for me to digest, right? I knew that I could read urban fiction. I started reading urban fiction that had romance elements into it because it bridged the gap for me, right? Which led to me reading more things that were more just plain old romance and enjoying them, right? You got to ease yourself in. You got to do the baby steps. You can't just dive head first all the way into stuff sometimes, because that can be overwhelming and it can lead you to like DNFing things. There's nothing wrong with DNFing a book, baby. Just put it down if you don't like it no more, okay? But when you're trying to give something a chance, DNFing something can feel defeating. DNFing means to not finish it. It can feel very defeating and like you tried something and maybe you wasted your money on a book and so on and so forth. When that's not really the case. It's just maybe it's not the right book for you right now. It's not for you for right now. It's for you for later. Okay, so don't beat yourself up. It's okay. So those are the things that I would say. That's what it means to read diversely. This is how you do it. This is how I incorporate things into my reading schedule. And if you guys want any more tips and tricks along that line, let me know. I am constantly going into bookstores and picking up stuff that I feel like maybe I'll never read, right? Or maybe, I feel like this book isn't for me. And then reading it and loving it. You are a reader at heart. I think the good thing about readers is our want to read is stronger than our want to do anything else. We will read the back of a Clorox white box if we have to fulfill the need to read, okay? We will listen to the podcast about books. We will we gonna read if necessary. But another book that I'll throw out there as an example is the Books of Jacob. Baby, when I tell you I felt dumb, but it's just not for me right now. Okay, I don't know when it's gonna be for me. It just ain't for me at the moment, and that's okay. But I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it. And it is. So now it is time for what y'all want to hear about. Y'all want to hear about Holler Child, a collection of short stories by Latoya Watkins, the author of The One, The Only Perish, which was one of my favorite reads of last year. So you're probably wondering, how did I get to reading a collection of short stories? Honestly, it is only because Latoya Watkins' name was on it. Now, I will say I did listen to Tananarive put out a collection of short stories. I will add a picture on the screen of that. I did listen to that earlier this year. It is horror. I did thoroughly enjoy some of those stories, but it wasn't convincing me that I liked collections of short stories, because I've listened to some and I just was like, this is terrible and bad, right? My gripe with short stories is the reason that I like reading, one of the reasons that I like reading, is because I want to be transported. I want to open up a book and I want to dive so deeply into the book that I forget that I'm actually living here on earth and that I think that I am the character, okay? I want to disassociate, baby. Every time I open a book, I want to be, I want to be with the characters, okay? I want to feel like I'm walking beside them on their journeys. I want to hate them. I want to love them. I want to cry with them. All of that, right? And with short stories, you just, as soon as you set your roots, it's over. And it be pissing me off. It really do be pissing me off, okay? Point blank in the period, it be making me mad. So I just don't like them. And I went into reading Holler Child knowing that, right? But I said, I really enjoyed Latoya Watkins. I really enjoyed Parrish. Like, she not gonna let a girl down. She not gonna embarrass me. She not gonna put me in a position to make, yes, she is. She is gonna put you in a position to make you uncomfortable. I was fixing to lie to you. But I wanted to give it a chance because I really, really like this author. I am here to tell you that she's blown me away again with 11 more stories that I actually was able to sink into. Like, I know these characters. I know them personally. I know the things that they've been through. I know these characters. And how do I even review a collection of short stories? I guess in a general sense, it is a beautiful collection about family and the complications that come with familial relationships, also romantic relationships, right? And how we try to manage our emotions, how we try to manage grief, how these relationships can trigger us across the board, right? I think something that is very evident in this is she is very aware how trauma repeats itself in families, and how those traumas don't only directly affect you and your life decisions, but they also directly affect your spouse, right? And your children and all of that sort of thing. She writes about those things in a way that makes them tangible, right? It's almost like she is holding a mirror up to us and writing about the everyday things that we do as Black people, right? Because that's who these stories are about. I can't speak for anybody else but us. She's holding this mirror up to us, right? And saying all of these things that we do and that we say and these traits that we have, they come from some sort of trauma, and us trying to figure out not only how to protect ourselves, but how to protect our children, how to keep us safe and how to keep us alive. And that sometimes those things that we're doing as a safety precaution are actually very dangerous to us in some ways. Not just in the now, but like on a generational front. So I figured I'd kind of point out or summarize some of the stories that were my favorite, without trying to spoil them for you. If I do, I apologize, but I'm not trying to. So the first story in this book is called The Mother. Side note, bring back table of contents. Bring them back. They didn't do nothing to nobody. Bring back the damn, bring them back. Okay. Shit. And also each story is about 20 pages, give or take, which I feel like it was perfect. So the first story, which was one of my favorites, and it made me laugh, okay? And I don't know if it made me laugh because it was genuinely funny or if it's because I got a sick, fucked up sense of humor. Sorry for the cussing. But it is about this woman that has people coming to her house interviewing her about her son, who was a cult leader, right? And he did some unsavory things, and they're coming to question her about it. She is an older woman, but we find out about her life, and she grew up in a whorehouse. She doesn't know who her son's father is, but she's ashamed of her history, right? And this kind of goes back to us holding this mirror up to our community. She was so bent up about what it means to be a whore, right? And how being the son of a whore is this detriment to her son, that it brings up the question of, is it better for him to be the son of a whore, or is it better for him to be known as a lunatic? Right? So that's all I'm going to tell you. But it's a conversation of like, she's so caught up with what everybody else thinks of her, right? Because the only reason we think that being a whore is bad is because someone told us that that was bad, right? It's not an original idea. It is what someone has told us. It is what religion has taught us. We are taught that this thing is bad. But who is the person that identifies you as a whore? The community does. So she's so caught up on the idea that like, I'll do anything but let him be the son of a whore. But what he turned out to be, was it actually better? Right? So does what the community say, is what they have to say all that great? Does it matter that much more? Right? So when I say that she holds up this mirror, it's like, whose auntie, uncle, cousin, brother, or whatever do you know that is so concerned with everyone else's view of them that they don't have a self view? They don't know who they are. They only know who they are based on what everyone else has told them. The next story that was heartbreaking, they all are a bit sad. Trigger warning. But the story Holler Child that the book is named after is trigger warning worthy. But I think overall it is a story about what it means to run from your own trauma. The two main characters in this story are a mother and her son. A very traumatic thing happens to her when she is younger that leads to her being pregnant with her son. She ends up raising her son by herself. She has a disability because of the thing that happened to her. And she also has some substance abuse issues, which has in turn made her son have to grow up faster. Now her son is being accused of the same thing that happened to her. Now, she has never talked to this baby about what happened to her and how he was conceived, or anything really. He's had to raise himself. But she is faced with a task, right? Do I does she do what she needed as a kid when these things happen to her? Or does she protect her child finally? I sobbed. I sobbed. I cried. Because again, you don't see that standing in it. When you are in things, you don't, the pieces to the puzzle are there, but you don't even necessarily see that it's the puzzle. Right? Like when you are in the midst of things happening and you're trying to fix and you're trying to figure out, your mind isn't there. This is why I tell y'all to read diversely. This is why I tell you to read outside of your comfort zone. You're going to see yourself in so many things and be like, damn, my bad. You can only learn from nonfiction. Fiction will get you together too. So that was a really good story. And like I told you a lot, but I didn't tell you all. The way that story wrapped up, I had to sit this book down for a little bit. Okay. Not that long, because I picked it right back up to finish reading it. And then there's the last story about, it is called Time After. One, I will say, I think this book changed my mind about, before I tell you what Time After is about, it changed my mind about collections of short stories because this one was put together very, very well. The order of the stories were perfect. Okay. And they are all stories that you can decide to read on the surface level, or you can go deep. You can read them surface level, right? You can just read them for what it is and not think and just go through. Or you can go deep if you would like. Time After is about a set of sisters. They are older, between like 60s and 70s. They're all younger than 75, older than 59. The two sisters are looking for one of their brothers. There was recently a death of one of their siblings, and one sister lives in California. She is very liberated. She is living her best life, like very much has gone away from their Southern upbringing and been able to live, right? I think one of the best things that you probably can do for yourself is leaving your hometown. I'm not saying you have to leave your state, but even moving a couple of towns away will change your perspective. I think that's why, a part of the reason why going to college and at least experiencing it is so important. So one sister has moved away, lived her life, so on and so forth. The other sister lives at home, never really flies, doesn't really travel, is living her mundane life, right? And she's very much not happy. But I think we get caught up in depression and don't realize how miserable we are because it is normal to us at this point. So they're looking for their brother because the three of them are who are left, right? And they have to go to Washington, D.C. This brother is gay and they have treated him like an outcast, mostly. Particularly the one sister that stayed in Texas and, didn't really live her life. And it talks about homophobia in a way that I haven't seen before. I think there's often a conversation about homophobia where if you are homophobic, low-key you probably are also as well gay, because the things that you say about other people are a direct reflection of you. If you are mean and nasty, that is a direct reflection of who you are in that moment, right? It may not always be who you are, but if you look at a person that is being authentically themselves and you find that a threat because you don't understand certain things, it says more about you than it does them. Keep that in mind. But in this particular story, it was more about, like, the sister, I don't think she was ever really mad that her brother was gay, right? I think she was mad that her brother was bold enough to get up and to get out. And that's all I'll say about that. It made me cry because I think we think people can't change when we don't necessarily realize that a lot of the things that, a lot of these nuanced thought processes and a lot of the, like, the homophobias and the racist, the homophobics and the racists of the world, some of them can change, right? But I don't think that we realize that their experiences come from their life experience, right? And we just assume that they are hateful and ignorant and all of these things when it comes from somewhere. Now, I ain't saying to excuse them. I ain't saying that. Excuse me. I'm just saying therapy is for everybody. Resources are available to you. You should get the help that you need. You should get the help that you need, because it is beneficial to you all. And people can change, right? People can change. It may take a little while, but people can change. And you just don't know the life experiences. And I think that applies for everything. You don't know the life experiences that are causing people to make the decisions that they're making, which is why I think writing like this is so important, because you get to meet these characters that tell you the nuances of why people are acting the way that they're acting, right? And we don't get that privilege all the time. And I'm not saying take the experiences in this book and project them onto people, but just kind of live your life knowing that you could be triggering someone the same way that they could be triggering you, right? And there's nothing wrong with it, right? It happens. Life experiences is a B word sometimes. Overall, I think I gave this book a 4.5. There was maybe one story in here that overall I loved, but it was just a little meh to me. So that's why I didn't give it a complete 5-star, but I highly recommend this book. And I love that reading outside of my comfort zone got me here. Okay, so in the comments, tell me what's a book that maybe you've had your eye on but you have not read because you felt like it was just a little bit too far outside of your comfort zone. I want to know. If you want any of the books that I mentioned in this video, you can shop my Amazon storefront. All of the books will be in the Amazon storefront, as well as my annotation tools. Okay, because y'all asked me about that too, and I'm always writing in my books. So without further ado, if no one has told you today, I love you. You are kind. You are smart. You are important. And I love you. Bye, friends.